everyone to our second Fireside Chat, the Mindshift Recovery Fireside Chat. It is a pleasure to be here with you. The team at Mindshift Recovery, we are honored to be here and talk about addiction recovery, give you insights on the neuroscience behind addiction, and also introduce you to Jose Salinas, who is an incredible team member of ours, and allow you to hear his personal journey. So we'll go ahead and start here. So here is our agenda for this evening. So we'll walk through some quick introductions. Some of you may have been on our last Fireside Chat. Some of you may be new to Mindshift Recovery. So just so we all know, you know who we are, and we get to introduce ourselves to you. We'll go through those quick introductions. We'll talk about the current state of addiction in the United States and why this is so important and crucial for us at Mindshift Recovery. Then we will turn it over to Dr. Jud Brewer, who will discuss the latest neuroscience behind recovery. We are so grateful to have him here and have you learn from him. If you are interested in the brain science behind recovery, he is absolutely the person you want to learn from. So from there, we'll shift into Jose, and we'll have you hear a personal journey of recovery from Jose Salinas. And then we will turn it over to Amy McLaren, who is our COO here at Mindshift Recovery. She will talk about how Mindshift is addressing addiction and also give you more insight on Mindshift Recovery as a whole. And then we're going to open up the session for a live Q&A. So we do have an opportunity. If you have questions throughout this Fireside Chat, you absolutely can ask them. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat here. We want to answer your questions. So if we don't get to all of the questions or your questions specifically on this call, we will follow up an email to make sure you have that information. So if there's any spark that comes up throughout this webinar, please feel free to throw that question in the chat. We're here to help. So with that, we'll give a quick overview of Mindshift Recovery, who we are. We are a nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to supporting people in all phases of their recovery journey from addiction. So our mission here at Mindshift Recovery is to help people move beyond substance use so that they can embrace a life filled with purpose, resilience, and well-being. And with that, I will introduce our team here, who we at Mindshift Recovery are very excited to have you here. So we'll tee it up with Dr. Jud Brewer. He is an addiction psychiatrist and neuroscientist. He's also professor at Brown University. We are absolutely thrilled to have him here on our team. The Mindshift Recovery work, Mindshift Recovery is driven by the work of Dr. Jud. So we'll go ahead and let you say hello.
Hello, and it's great to be here with everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Jud. Josh Roman, moving right along. He is our CEO here at Mindshift Recovery. He could not be here with us. He is also very busy here with us in spirit, however. Amy McLaren, we are pleased to introduce you to Amy McLaren. She is the COO of Mindshift Recovery. She is a woman who is leading the charge here at Mindshift. And so I will go ahead and turn this over to Amy so that you can give a quick intro and hello.
Quick hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's just such an honor to be doing this work and to be here with you all tonight as we sort of introduce ourselves to the world and kick off all the exciting work that we have coming to help people with their recovery process.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Brianna. I am the marketing and brand executive here at Mindshift Recovery. I am also in addiction recovery myself, so it is an absolute dream and pleasure and honor to be here with you all and support. And next we have Jose Salinas. He is a peer recovery coach and trainer here for Mindshift Recovery. Jose, I'll let you go ahead and say hello.
Hello, everyone. So happy to be here with you today, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Jose. We have Dan Holcomb here. He is a behavior change facilitator and a sales and marketing executive for Mindshift Recovery. Go ahead, Dan, and you can give a wave or say hello.
Hi, Dan Holcomb. Once again, just so happy to be a part of this team and to see things kicking off. This program literally saved my life and transformed it. So I'm looking forward to being a part of sharing it with you and those out there who need it.
Thank you, Dan. And last but certainly not least, we have Thomas McCann. He is our behavioral health clinician here. So I'll go ahead and let Tommy, you say hello and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I won't waste any time. Pleasure and privilege to be here.
Thanks, Tommy. All right, now with that, we will go ahead and move forward into the next portion of the Fireside Chat, the state of addiction in the US. This is something that drives us here at Mindshift Recovery and really drives us to provide additional solutions for the recovery community. So the opioid epidemic continues. In 2021, the United States faced an ongoing opioid epidemic. We saw rapid high rates of opioid addiction and also overdose deaths. We've also seen alcohol consumption spike as well during the pandemic. That led to many changes in substance use patterns. Many people had to shift their own recovery, means of recovery as well. And as a result, we saw telehealth addiction treatments shift as well. So treatments for the recovery community shifted towards telehealth services, providing resources for those in the recovery community. So it's crucial for us to continue to provide resources to those who are currently suffering or want to grow in their recovery journey. So with that, it is my great pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Jud Brewer, who will now talk about the neuroscience of addiction and recovery and a bit about the Mindshift method. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Jud.
Great. Thanks, Brianna. As a psychiatrist, and when I was first training to be an addiction psychiatrist, I noticed that I had a really hard job. And part of that that I noticed about the hard part was that a lot of the treatments that I was being taught to administer were based on willpower. And so certainly there have been some medications that I've found very helpful for a lot of my patients over the years. For example, buprenorphine for medication-assisted treatment for opioid use. But there always felt like there was an element that was missing. And so as a neuroscientist, I started about 20 years ago, was really interested in this question around like, what were we missing? And what was it about the willpower approach that wasn't quite helping my patients? And so it started a journey of just really exploring how habits form and what we actually know from a neuroscience standpoint. And as you saw from that slide briefly, it seems like there is a common element, an element that really helps us learn habits that's a very evolutionarily conserved process all the way back to the sea slug, where we basically learn habits. And these habits help us survive. They're really set up for this survival mechanism. And they tend to come in two flavors. One is called positive reinforcement. Many of us have heard this because it is such a common phenomenon. And that was actually set up to help us remember where food is. So you can imagine our ancient ancestors who didn't have refrigerators had to find food and then remember where it was. So when they found that food, that was the trigger. That's the first element of any habit loop. Then they ate that food. That's the second element of any habit loop, which is a behavior. And then their brain sent this dopamine signal. Actually, this dopamine signal is triggered from their stomach that set off dopamine firing in the brain that said, hey, remember what you ate and where you found it. So that's the third element of any habit loop. And that feeds back to say the next time we're triggered, we perform that behavior and it repeats the process. That's called positive reinforcement. And negative reinforcement works in a very similar way. You imagine we're on the savannah, we see a dangerous animal coming at us. that our behavior is to run away and the reward is that we don't get eaten. And that says, hey, remember that that's a dangerous part of the savannah or the woods or whatever. So these processes, evolutionarily conserved all the way back to the sea slug, are ones that we humans carry into modern day and learn virtually every habit that we have. Now, this doesn't mean that habits are not healthy or helpful. Most habits, I would say 95, 98% of the habits that we perform every day are very helpful for us. There are a couple that become dominant and can get in the way of human flourishing. And this is where addictions come in. So whether it's smoking a cigarette, using cocaine, drinking alcohol, or even using social media, we can get caught in these same habit loops, but they're not actually set up for evolutionary survival. Now they're co-opted in modern day when we get stressed, when we get anxious, when we're lonely. There are all these things that trigger these behaviors, and then we get stuck in these cycles. Now, the interesting part about this from a neuroscience perspective is that the critical element for driving these behaviors is how rewarding they are. And the critical element for stepping out of these behaviors is how rewarding they are. So as I started to struggle with helping my own patients with their addictions, I started to realize it wasn't about telling themselves to stop smoking a cigarette, to stop overeating, to stop using whatever the substance was. They already knew this. They just didn't have control over their brains, which makes a lot of sense from a neuroscience perspective, because willpower isn't really in the equations for behavior change. So what is in those equations from a neuroscience perspective is how rewarding a behavior is. And so when we looked at this, we realized there was a common element, which we all have, but may not be emphasizing enough, which is awareness. And what I mean by this is when we start to become aware of the results of our behaviors, remember, it's behavior leading to a quote unquote reward from a neuroscience perspective. When we see that that behavior is no longer rewarding for us, our brains start to become disenchanted. We get less excited to do that behavior in the future. To use a simple example of smoking, when my patients come in and want to quit smoking, I tell them to go ahead and smoke. And they're thinking, man, my doctor just told me to smoke. But what I also tell them is to really, see if they can play with paying attention as they smoke that cigarette. And universally, they had patients come back and say, how did I not notice this? Where they report that cigarettes taste like crap. Now, this isn't to say that, if we pay attention when we drink alcohol or use drugs, that suddenly they're not going to be intoxicating. That's not what I'm saying. But if we look at the results of these behaviors and we look at the hangover, we look at the social relationships, we look at all the things that are not so rewarding about that behavior, and we look at those results carefully, that helps us become disenchanted with those behaviors. So we started developing programs to see if we could actually use this neuroscience approach instead of willpower to help people step out of their old habits. We started with a study way back when I was in residency where we brought in individuals who are trying to shift their alcohol and cocaine dependence. And we compared this methodology to gold standard cognitive therapy. And it was as good as cognitive therapy at helping people not relapse to substance use. What we also found was that it was better at helping them cope with psychological stressors, things that typically lead to relapse. We went on to do a study with smoking cessation and found that this method was 5 times better than gold standard treatment at helping people quit smoking. And at that point, we realized, maybe there's something to this. And this was over 10 years ago. So over the subsequent years, we actually started to really pay attention to what folks were saying. And we found that there was actually a 3-step process. We call this the 3 gears that people were going through. And the process goes like this. 1, they have to recognize what habit loop they're in. 2, they have to see how unrewarding it is by paying attention to the results of that behavior, just like I've talked about with smoking cigarettes. And then 3, it's really helpful to bring in what we call a bigger, better offer. And there are 2 main flavors that are intrinsically rewarding that we all have of these bigger, better offers. One is curiosity and one is kindness. So when we're stuck with a craving, instead of resisting that craving or running away from it or just succumbing to it, we can train people to be curious about it. Oh, what does this feel like? For example, I had a patient who came into my office and said, Doc, I feel like my head's going to explode if I don't smoke. And so we walked through that head exploding experience, getting really curious. Oh, what does head exploding feel like? And he realized that it was made up of a bunch of physical sensations. And we mapped out the intensity, and it went up and up and up and up. And then it peaked and went down. And his eyes got really big at that moment. And I said, what happened? He said, well, I usually smoke a cigarette before it gets that strong. But I realized, perhaps for the first time for him, that if he didn't smoke, that craving went away on its own. And with that realization, he realized that he had so much more power. He could get in that driver's seat so much more easily than letting that cigarette drive his life. He realized that, oh, these were physical sensations. He didn't have to be afraid of them, right? What's so scary about fear? Well, when he noticed that these were physical sensations, they weren't as scary to him anymore. And he started to realize, oh, he could be with those cravings, and through curiosity, he could ride them out. So that's one flavor of a bigger, better offer of stepping out of these habit loops. Another is kindness. Why do we emphasize kindness? Because we are so good at judging ourselves for everything. The past, what's happening right now, we're going to judge ourselves for what might happen in the future. We're just great at judging. And so we can compare, well, what's it feel like to judge ourselves for things that happened in the past that we have no control over now because they're over, versus what's it like to give ourselves a break? What's it like to be kind to ourselves? Again, kindness is that bigger, better offer. And when we compare those two, our brain's going to prefer kindness, just like our brain prefers curiosity to fighting that craving. And when we do this, we can start to train our brains. Once we learn how our brains work, we can learn how to work with our brains. And then we can even put our brains to work for us so that we can step out of these old habit loops. We can get in control again. And all of this through just leveraging these simple mechanics of how our brains work. So with that, I'll just finish up by saying, this methodology, it's not that it's something secret. It's not something that's complex. It's not something that you have to use this method and nobody else's method. This is really about leveraging the neuroscience of how our brains work. And it's very consistent, whether somebody's in AA, whether somebody's in smart recovery, whether somebody's in some other community-based program, whether somebody's on medication-assisted treatment. All of these are consistent with just learning how to work with our brains. And that's one thing that we're really excited about, is that this can be a tool that anybody can use in conjunction with anything that they're already doing. So I will stop there, and I want to turn it over to Jose, who can actually talk about his story and how how learning how to work with his brain was helpful for him.
Most definitely. It has been a very difficult challenge learning how to work with this brain from mine, for sure. Dr. Jud, you have definitely set a really sweet tone to the way that I want to start my story. I first want to say hello again to our group here, and thank you for being with us tonight. I want to say, I wanted to start sharing my story in the usual way that I start my story, but I first want to say that awareness has definitely played a role in my long-term recovery. Over the years of the 30 years of active addiction, because that was my life, 30 years of active addiction. Today I'm going to talk about my story about 15 minutes or less. And so I wrote a few pointers of things that I wanted to touch. And I was telling Amy and Brianna that I usually write things and I never actually talk about those things that I write. That's how I do things, because it always kind of leads a different way for good reasons. But anyway, I'm a person in long-term recovery, and what that means is that I haven't been using substances, and I've been enjoying life today for at least almost 11 years. And I want to share a couple of things for good reasons of where I believe that addiction began for me. And one was trauma, and the other one was habits, because habits is how I cope with the traumas. So for those of you who are familiar with ACEs study, and the ACEs study was a study done back in the 1990s, and which is adverse childhood experiences that are potential traumatic events that had negative and long-lasting effects in children up to the age of 18. So the participants had 10 different questions about physical, emotional, and or sexual abuse, to divorce and incarceration, and of a parent or guardian. And the participants were asked these questions to the age of before 18. And so the individuals that score 4 or more, they were nearly 2 times more likely to develop smoking, and it was smoking and heart disease and or cancer. They were 7 times more likely to develop alcoholism. They were 11 times more likely to engage in IV drug use. And they were 19 more likely to attempt suicide. So why am I sharing this with you? What does this have to do with me? So I scored 10 out of 10 on these questions. So that's the reason I share this with you. So when I was the age of 4, I grew up in poverty. And so this is why I share this, because, for me, it was like, this wasn't something for me to be proud of, but it's something that I am here and I made it because of this development awareness over time and really going in and out of treatment and in and out of jail and prison. It's like, why did I make it? Why am I here? Yes, we can say resilient, we can say willpower. I mean, whatever, but anyway, went through so many different, so many different experiences. Anyway, I'm trying to kind of recapture the traumatic events in my body, because there's still some of that experience that goes back and forth every time I revisit. But anyway, so, with the struggles of addiction over 30 years of substance use, and during those 30 years, I've never tried to quit. I've only tried to manage it, and it wasn't until the last 7 years of active addiction that I actually tried recovery. The last 7 years of active addiction. And I tried several different residential treatments. I went through medicated assisted treatment, went to many meetings. I had many sponsors. I went to church, and I couldn't get it. And I also, besides just going to church, and I ended up being homeless. And till I landed in jail one last time. It was November 30th, 2012. That was the last time I used. Ended up getting arrested. I get taken to jail. I was sentenced to 1 year in jail. And that was the time that I had my tipping point. And I call it a tipping point because a lot of people say, you just gotta hit rock bottom. And I mean, if you think about it, if you go back to that 4-year-old kid, I mean, how much lower can you get? Abandoned, neglected, abuse. In a poor country, all he owned was a pair of shorts, no underwear, no socks, hungry. I mean, how much lower can you get? Didn't have a chance, didn't stand a chance, didn't know any different at that time. Plus it became, by the time he was 12 and became addicted, I mean, that was normal for that young kid. It became normal. So it was like, for some, maybe they have to hit bottom. For others, it's trauma. For others, it's their habits, But maybe it doesn't have anything to do with bottoms or tipping points. But either way, the point I'm trying to make here, that I had so many opportunities and so many tries, and I wanted something different. Those last 7 years, I was really trying, going in and out of treatments and trying to get it because I wanted something different. Because I had been through so much, in and out of jail, and just suffering and couldn't get any, couldn't change. So after that 1 year sentence in jail, I started practicing meditation, and it was during that time that I experienced that awareness that something was changing in me. Because I remember there was a friend of mine that visited me in jail, and he goes, "Jose, you just got to learn how to rest." So there was a Christian friend of mine, pastor, and he was coming from a different perspective. And I myself, I come from a Christian background, but the way he brought it was like rest in God, rest in the Lord. But it was like, for me, it was like rest. But what do you mean, Pastor? I'm in jail. I can rest all day. I mean, I can sleep all day if I want to. How am I going to rest? So I looked up the word, and the Webster word means rest, right? Rest means free from activity, peace of mind, and peace of spirit. So I took it back and I meditated on that word, and I thought about it, and it's that rest from my activity of the mind. So I go back to this one quote that I heard, that within the stimulus and the reaction, I can remember, there is a space, right? So there was that space, that quiet space within, and I started to really practice that space, that quiet space within, and really practice in meditation. And it was all the guilt and all the shame and all the things that I couldn't accomplish anymore that I started to practice meditation and reading books. And I would meditate on scripture. I would meditate on other books that I would read. So practice and meditation really started to shift in things within my mind. And I knew that I no longer was the same person. I finally found something that was working for me. So today I'm almost 11 years without the use of any drugs or alcohol. No smoking, clean and sober, just I've been, the only thing that I have a hard time staying away from is ice cream and Mexican sweetbread. Boy, if don't ever try conchitas and chocolate milks, I swear to you, you will have a hard time staying away from them, I'm telling you. So I've been working in the mental health field and substance use recovery for 9 years. I'm a recovery coach, a trainer for other coaches. I'm a facilitator. I'm an advocate for people in recovery. I love serving others to find their pathway of recovery. I always say this, that I didn't survive addiction for myself, but for other people. I survive addiction to serve others. And, that's why I'm here today. I work in this field because I survived. I mean, you heard what I just shared with you. Everything I've been through, I didn't make it this far just to enjoy and, make money and not help others who are out there suffering. 30 years of addiction, all the suffering that I've been through, there is a purpose for me, and the purpose is to serve others. So I'm grateful that I met Dr. Jud, and I'm going to share a little bit, and I'm going to speed it up a bit so that we can get to some questions. When I was released from jail, because after that 1 year sentence, I was still homeless for a couple of weeks, and I got a job at the local CMH, and I started working there. It was 2014 when I started working there, and I attended a breakfast and learn. And my good friend April was speaking at that time, and she was speaking about the benefits of mindfulness. And I remember all the benefits that she was sharing, building awareness, self-awareness, and bunch of other things. Blood pressure goes down. Well, my blood pressure is a little bit high right now, by the way, because I'm a little nervous, but anyway, that's normal. But and I hadn't heard about mindfulness by that time, just meditation, working on meditation. But anyway, she was talking about how all this benefits. So when I go back to my desk, I started researching, Googling mindfulness. It's specifically mindfulness-based addiction recovery. And I started emailing people that I found over the internet. And the only person that was humble and kind to return my email was Dr. Jud. So he returns my email, and he introduced me to Crave and Quit, which he spoke about it just a little while ago, which is an app, a smoking cessation program that is very effective to manage recovery from addictions. And I learned a lot about that science of addiction from Crave and Quit, and also his book, The Craven Mind. I love, that part where it talks about that addiction is more than just drugs. It's the technology and food, and it's how habits are built. Just any habit, even just as simple as drinking water, brushing your teeth, that it's built through the reward-based learning system. And so Jud's work helped me a lot, even in my personal skills and as well as my professional skills, because I used a lot of the same skills that I learned for my personal recovery. I utilized as a coach, in helping others with working in craving and managing, the cravings. Is how do you manage your cravings? So some of the things that I utilized in managing my own cravings in early recovery was one of the practices with RAIN. So how do you recognize? Let me back up a little bit. So one of the things that I had a little bit of difficulty with was normalizing cravings and triggers, because in recovery and your typical, or I wouldn't say typical, but in some of the more your recovery groups within our community, like 12 steps, or usually think of triggers and cravings as something that is negative, and or seeing triggers as kind of like evil, like, oh, triggers, go to meetings, gotta get yourself in a meeting, and it's okay. But they see them as like something bad, but it's really normal. Triggers and cravings are very normal, but we need to learn how to manage them and how to navigate those triggers. So I'm not a surfer, Jud, but you talk about surfing the waves and surfing the triggers and the cravings. So I'm not going to use that analogy of surfing the cravings and the triggers, but so RAIN stands for, the R stands for recognizing the craving or the trigger as it arises. So you recognize it, and then the A stands for acknowledging and accepting the craving or the trigger as it arises, and then the I for identifying. So you've identified, what does it feel like in the body? What does that? What are the things that you're identifying with that craving or that trigger? And then you start to notice what happens as it arises, and as it starting to disappear, that craving, as it starts to go away. And you also, there's questions that I would ask myself, like what do I get from it if I use? What would I get from it? And then how long would it last if I end up using? Like, oh, what are the results if I end up using? So those are questions that I would ask myself, or I would write down different things. Like, if I end up eating this, what am I going to get from it? My stomach is going to hurt. If I end up eating this ice cream, it's really going to be bad for me. I'm going to get really bloated, and it's not going to feel good. So those are different questions that I would ask as I would navigate with some of these exercises, which even for emotions, like if I get really angry, what am I, how do I know that people are thinking this about me? If I start just making stories in my mind about things. So it's really, really important for me to just navigate some of those questions before I just made assumptions about certain things, or made a decision to go with a trigger or a craving. So another neat thing that I also recognized about some of the practices was, hold on, I got a little bit lost on some of this. I started looking at some of the notes, but with addiction, recognizing that addiction was not just about the substance, but it's about a relationship with an experience to either a substance or an event. So it's more than just being a drug or alcohol, basically. So Anyway, I'm going to stop there because I'm just going to be babbling from this point forward. I think I might have went over my 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and take some questions.
Thank you so much, Jose. That was
Welcome.
beautiful, beautiful share. Thank you for sharing with us all. And with that, we will turn it over to, we have Amy McLaren here. And so we'll turn it over to Amy, and then we'll talk about the questions that we have as well. So Amy is the COO here for Mindshift Recovery. And Amy will go ahead and talk about what we're doing as an organization to help support those in recovery. So with that, Amy, take it away.
Hey. Well, hello again, everybody. Thank you so much, Jose, for sharing your story, your courage, your just noble heart. It's how we recover, right? One helping another. And thank you, Dr. Jud, for, dedicating your life to this work, and helping to reduce the suffering of this crazy human experience. So that being said, I think that's why we're all here tonight. Those of us working together at Mindshift Recovery, and those of you who are curious about us. There are so many pathways, as both Dr. Jud and Jose have mentioned, so many different approaches to recovery, full sobriety, yet so many are still struggling and so many are still suffering. We know there needs to be more help to offer. And our goal here at Mindshift Recovery is to meet everyone where they are. So whether you're new to recovery or you're simply curious about your relationship to substances and would like to maybe reshape or redefine your relationship to substances, or perhaps you're sober and you haven't been using for a long time, but you're looking maybe to move from kind of surviving into thriving, or you want to just enhance your life experience or help others. Our aim is to make sure that our programs and our services are open and inclusive for everybody. So that being said, we are a new, small but mighty organization. We are just getting started, but some of our key fundamental programs that we are stepping into offering, the first thing will be a national community, which will be starting at the end of this month. And Brianna will share a little bit more about that and how you get involved. But the purpose of this forum will be, it'll be led by Dr. Jud and our co-facilitation team, including Jose and Dan. You can learn more about this method, learn more about your mind and how your mind works and how you can get your mind to work for you. You can learn more about the habit loops, processing. You can give and receive support to others, and just practice shifting into that embodied awareness that Dr. Jud so beautifully described. So that'll be every week, Thursdays at noon. And we're also in the process of building a digital application. And within this application will be a whole library of Dr. Jud's work. So we'll have classes and educational sessions, practices and tools, journals, all the things you need to start practicing this in your life. And then finally, we're looking to bring these tools, our programs and services into recovery residences, inpatient programs, sober living. We want to help people as early as we possibly can on their recovery journey. And so what we love so much about our program and Dr. Jud's method is that you can carry it along with you. So even if you learn it very, very early in your recovery journey, it's something that you can carry along with you forever. I'm similar to Jose. I've been sober about 10 years. I learned about this work very early in my recovery. And for me, I know for a fact it is the reason. It is the reason that I'm able to have the life that I have today. So this is hopefully won't be all that we're going to do, but this is where we're making our beginning. So we have a website up and running. You can sign up for our newsletter, get involved in our community, and we really hope to expand and be able to do more in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Amy, for providing that insight. And with that, we will go ahead and turn it over to the live Q&A. So we'll get started here for Dr. Jud and Jose. Let's jump into it. So the first question that we have here is for Jose. So Jose, if you could or would be open to sharing with us specific moments in early recovery and the present day where this method has made a significant impact in your path. So I know you talked about that in your story you just shared. If there are any highlights or anything else that was left out that you could share with anyone who may be watching, they can take this insight in their back pocket.
Yeah, definitely knowing that addiction is more than just, again, I think I talked about that addiction is more than just drugs and alcohol. That is anything that you continue to use that has a negative impact in your life. Everyone has a hard time, and anything that you have a hard time abstaining from, it really takes, I think that when I learned that that's what addiction is, it kind of took the stigma away, because I like sharing my story, and now that that you heard my story, I was really ashamed of because of the stigma around addiction. So the shame and the guilt, like even as someone in early recovery, like to come around other people that were like grew up different than me, it was kind of difficult even in early recovery. So learning about like Dr. Jud's, like the way that you explained it, I think that took away the stigma. When you learn that addiction is more than just a drug, that in itself kind of like puts it in a different perspective. Because when you hear about addiction, so in society, they usually think of, oh, addiction, oh, it's those people, the ones, the addicts over that sleep under the bridge, or the ones that lost, they're in jail, or the ones that are in the rehabs, those people. So I think that's kind of what I took from that. I think that was really important to me. Yeah, and it also benefited. It also started to benefit in the other dimensions of wellness in my life. I always said that it didn't just, I didn't want to just be sober, but to live better than well. And I can say that, that is true in my life today, that I'm not just sober, that I'm looking to be better in other dimensions of my life. Like I'm not just working and being sober, but I'm working on learning how to balance my finances. I'm learning how to be better socially, not to be, like I want to learn how to not to be too socially awkward, or, how am I better and environmentally well, and just those different things. Those are important to have, because, those things get lost in addiction, a lot of those different things. And I think that a lot of people that have been struggling with addiction lose a lot of those different areas. So it's important to learn. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jose. Yeah, beautifully put too. Reminds me of what Amy also mentioned too, right? The opportunity from to really shift into thriving, right? We get sober, or we jump into recovery, and then we can learn how to thrive. And it's beautifully put. Okay, question number 2. This is another question for you, Jose. So let's see. For those who may be considering this Mindshift method for their own recovery, what advice or insights would you offer based off of your own experience? Are there any key takeaways that you'd like to share to encourage others who might be on their recovery journey? Oop.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yep. So for those who may be considering the Mindshift method for their own recovery, what advice or insights would you give them based off of your own experience? Are there any key takeaways or that you'd like to share to encourage others?
I would say that take your time. I say explore different pathways. based on your beliefs and values, explore different pathways based on your beliefs and values, and try it out more than once. When you try something, try it out more than once. If you don't like it once, maybe, try it again, and you don't have to try it right away. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that you fail. You might just learn something different or a different way to do it. And also be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because sometimes, you're gonna be uncomfortable more than once. And because change is difficult, and it is also scary, because but it's also uncomfortable being stuck in that same place. So yeah, so you just have to take a chance.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you so much. That's great. Okay, next question. This is a question for Dr. Jud. So, Dr. Brewer, can you tell us about the origins of the Mindshift method and how your research in neuroscience and mindfulness contributed to this development? What inspired you to create this approach to recovery?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I can take absolutely zero credit for the origins of this, which I love, because then I don't have to defend, this is mine. The origins of this actually go back to Buddhist psychology, way before paper was even invented. It is said that this method is what got the Buddha enlightened. And the thing I like about, so that's the true origin. And then probably historically there are other cultural influences there in other cultures that were doing similar things. But I was introduced to these methodologies in general to help me work with my own mind, and realized how disorganized my own mind was, and realized, oh, this could be helpful for me. Started studying it personally, and then got really inspired when I was finishing medical school, because I started to see this parallel where my patients were using the same language as the Buddhist psychologist and what I was learning in my own practice. And so became really inspired to just try this out and see if it could help people with addictions. And so it was basically what I was doing was translating some of these methods into modern, in modern day practice. And that's where I also realized that, some of these folks in modern day were actually, even the scientists, not just my patients, but the scientists were talking in similar terms. And this is where I started to see this overlap between this Buddhist psychology and this reinforcement learning process. So that's what got me inspired to explore it, was just seeing how everybody was basically using slightly different language for the same thing. But more importantly, I was seeing that my patients were really suffering with this willpower-based approach. And there was like suffering on top of suffering, because they were failing and they felt like it was their fault that they were failing. And that was just a travesty. Makes my heart sink when I think about this, because one, it's not people's fault that their brains get stuck in these habits. I think Jose was mentioning this. And two, there's a simple way to kind of leverage our brain to step out of these habits. And so it's possible for any of us. We don't have to possess any special powers. We don't have to, have a college degree. There's nothing about education here. It's really about our own direct experience, which we all have. And so bringing all of that together was really inspiring for me. And then, of course, as a scientist, I wanted to see if this was real, because if it's not, as an addiction psychiatrist, I can't be saying, hey, try this. I've been trained to taking a Hippocratic oath to first do no harm. And then I want to make sure that I'm suggesting things that work for my patients. And so doing the research myself really helped me see, oh, this stuff works in randomized controlled trials, and we can see how it works. And the more we learn about it, the simpler the methodology becomes. It distills down and down and down to the point where, we call this, the 3 gears, and this is this mind shift mindset.
Thank you, Dr. Jud. Thank you so much. That was great. Very, very interesting. All right, let's see. Our last question here is also for Dr. Jud as well. So the Mindshift method is a blend of neuroscience and mindfulness for recovery. Can you highlight some key findings from your research that underpin the effectiveness of this method and how it can benefit individuals seeking recovery?
I'd be happy to. So what we've seen in our research over the last couple of decades now is just starting with small randomized controlled trials to see, does this have legs? Yes. When we compare it to cognitive behavioral therapy, as good as for preventing relapse. When we compare it to gold standard treatment for smoking cessation, 5 times better at helping people quit smoking. And then when we look at the mechanisms, my lab's even done some neuroimaging studies where we bring people in who want to quit smoking, and we can show them cute, pictures of people smoking cigarettes that activates their brain's network that gets caught up in craving. And then we can randomize them to get our Craving to Quit app or the National Cancer Institute's Quit Guide, scan them a month later, and we can see correlations between reductions in cigarette smoking and reductions in these brain areas in the mindfulness training in the Craving to Quit app, but we don't see those correlations with these cognitive therapy apps. So what that suggests is that there's a theoretical mechanism which is really helping people learn to be with unpleasant experiences. As Jose was saying, it's really helpful to develop distress tolerance, and distress tolerance isn't about just trying to grit your teeth and force yourself through something. That is not the most efficient. That can be helpful at some times for some people, but we want to find something that's more universally helpful. And what we see from these studies is that this is really about learning to accept what's happening. And paradoxically, that acceptance is what helps us be with our experience, where we, instead of running away, we open to our experience. I love this phrase. The only way out is through. And what that suggests is that we can't be running from ourselves. We can't be running from the fear. We can't be running from the cravings. But paradoxically, we can turn and not just face them like I'm going to fight you, but we face them with open arms and we say, bring it on, come here, and we open to this and we start to realize, oh, fear is uncomfortable, but it's not scary. Oh, a craving, my head's not going to explode. And the more we bring that curiosity in, the more we bring the kindness in, the more we can learn to open to whatever our experience is and really develop this distress tolerance that is really, really solid.
I usually say it's grow time.
I love it. It's grow time. Yes. When we turn toward our experience, we can grow from it.
We can grow from it.
It's grow time.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Jud and Jose, for those incredible answers to those questions. And thank you everyone for joining and hopping on. This was a great session, a great second fireside chat. We are thrilled to have you all here. And as Amy mentioned, we will be moving forward with our national community calls, which will be launching on November 30th. At 12 p.m. Eastern and 9 a.m. Pacific. We would love to have you there. So I will go ahead and drop the link to sign up in the chat. We will also follow up in email with the recording of this fireside chat, as well as the link to sign up for the weekly call as well, just in case you missed it. But otherwise, with that, we will go ahead and give some time back to your evening. Thank you all so much for showing up, and we look forward to connecting with you next time. Take care.